"I warned you," she sneered, her voice a poisonous whisper, dripping with a self-satisfied malice that made my blood run cold. She stood there, framed by the blinding afternoon sun, her smile a thin, cruel line as she held up a laminated sheet of paper. It was a court order, temporary restraining order demanding I cease all activity on what she claimed was community property. The dozens of people gathered behind her. A sea of confused faces looked on as she gestured triumphantly to the bright orange tape now strung across the front of my land. My entire world, the cabin I had just painstakingly restored, was about to be snatched away. I could feel the panic rising in my chest, a hot, suffocating wave. But before I could even formulate a single coherent thought, the sound of a vehicle turning over echoed from behind her, and I turned just in time to see the bright green flash of a small, county-issued tractor pulling up to her driveway. And that's when everything went wrong. Before I tell you what happened next, drop a comment. What would you do if this happened to you? And subscribe to HOA Files. My name is Mike, and my story, like so many of these HOA nightmares, started with a dream. Not a grand, extravagant dream, but a quiet, peaceful one. My family has owned a small, rustic cabin on this lake for generations. It's a place of memories, summer spent fishing with my grandpa, quiet evenings listening to the crickets, the smell of pine and lake water, forever etched in my mind. It's a little log home with a wraparound porch and a stone fireplace that was built by my great-grandfather. It's nothing spectacular, but it's mine. Well, technically it's my family's, but I inherited it a few years ago when my grandfather passed. It was a little run down, in need of a lot of love, but I had a vision for it. I wanted to restore it, to bring it back to its former glory. I wanted a place to escape, a sanctuary from the relentless, high-stakes world of my city job. The cabin is unique because it's situated on a small, private peninsula that juts out into the lake. A narrow, two-lane dirt road is the only way in or out. The land itself is not part of the Whispering Pines HOA, the community, with all their perfect manicured lawns and identical-looking houses, starts a full mile down the road from me, on the other side of the lake. I was a member once for about a year when I had a small rental property within their boundaries. I paid my dues, attended a meeting once, and then sold the property. I had no idea I was about to be dragged back into their world, and that my quiet, peaceful dream was about to become a living nightmare. My first interaction with the HOA this time around came in the form of an email. Not a personal one, but a mass email sent to the entire community. It was from the HOA president, a woman named Beverly. The subject line was, "Important, new neighbor information," the email stated. In no uncertain terms, that the new neighbor on the peninsula is not part of our community and will not be given access to community amenities, including the private beach and the community boat launch. It also stated that any attempt to use these amenities would be considered trespassing. It felt like a warning, a subtle message to me and to everyone else that I wasn't welcome. I shrugged it off. I didn't need their amenities. I had my own private lake access. I had my own peace and quiet. I had no idea this was just the opening act. A few weeks later, I was out on my property, cleaning up some fallen branches, when I saw a car pull up to the end of my road, a sleek, black SUV. The passenger door opened, and a woman in a perfectly tailored blazer stepped out. It was Beverly. She was holding a clipboard, and she was striding purposefully toward me, a thin, tight smile on her face. "Excuse me," she said, her voice a cool, brittle thing. "I'm Beverly, the HOA president, and I'm just here to make sure you're aware of the bylaws." "I am," I said, my voice as calm as I could make it. "But I'm not part of your HOA, Beverly." She laughed, a short, humorless little puff of air. "Oh, I know that. But your road, this little dirt path that leads up to your property, it's part of our community." My stomach dropped. I had no idea what she was talking about. I had a survey done when I inherited the property. The road was on my deed. It was my property. "I think you're mistaken," I said, trying to stay calm. "This road is on my land. It's my private driveway." "Not anymore," she said, a wicked little smirk spreading across her face. The community just voted to annex it. We're turning it into a community walking path. You'll have to find another way to access your property. And of course, you'll have to pay a road usage fee. I stood there, speechless. The audacity, the sheer nerve of her. She was literally trying to steal my driveway and then charge me to use it. You can't do that, I said, my voice rising with anger. That's illegal. It's not, she said, tapping her clipboard. It was in the bylaws. We had a vote. And you, as a non-member, didn't have a say. But we did just vote to allow you to use our private boat launch and beach. For a fee, of course. The feeling of violation was overwhelming. She wasn't just a petty neighbor. She was a genuine threat. I didn't have time for this nonsense. I had a cabin to restore and a life to live. I was so exhausted, so stressed, and so angry that I just turned around and walked away. I couldn't even look at her. But I knew this was just the beginning. The next day, a certified letter arrived. This wasn't an email, but a formal letter from the HOA, stamped with an official seal. The letter detailed a new set of bylaws, apparently passed in a unanimous community vote, that designated my road as community property, effective immediately. The letter also stated that my continued refusal to pay the road usage fee would be considered a trespass on HOA property and would result in fines. The fines were astronomical. $1,000 a day for unauthorized use of community property. My heart was a frantic drum in my chest. This wasn't just a petty squabble. This was a hostile takeover. I was so angry, so utterly hopeless, that I couldn't even think straight. I paced my living room, the letter a crumpled ball in my hand. It seemed I was beaten. She had used her new position to change the rules, and I was the one who would pay for it. I felt a sense of isolation growing in me. It felt like it was me against everyone. I tried to talk to some of the old-timers I knew in the community. They all gave me the same response. Beverly is a tyrant. She just came in and took over. We're all afraid to speak up. My heart sank. I was on my own. I wasn't just fighting Beverly. I was fighting an entire system she had co-opted. A few weeks later, I drove up to my cabin, ready to spend the weekend on my peaceful retreat, and found a dozen cars parked on my road. People milling around, their faces expectant. Beverly was there, a clipboard in her hand, a triumphant smirk on her face. "What is this?" I asked, my voice low and dangerous. "We're having the annual HOA block party," she said, as if it was the most natural thing in the world. "I'm just assigning duties. We thought it would be fun to have it on our new community road. You can help if you want." I stood there, speechless. The audacity, the sheer nerve of her. She was literally trying to turn my private driveway into a community party with me as an unwilling participant. My peaceful sanctuary was about to be overrun by 100 strangers. I felt a surge of pure, blinding fury. I turned around, got back in my truck, and drove back down the hill. I was not going to let this happen. I was not going to give in. I spent the next few days holed up in my home, trying to figure out what to do. I had to expose her, but I didn't know how. I called an old friend who was a lawyer, explained the situation. He told me that my case was strong, but that getting an injunction to stop the block party would take time I didn't have. The block party was in 2 days. I felt a sense of despair. She was going to win. She was going to prove that she could do whatever she wanted. And there was nothing I could do to stop her. Then I remembered something. Something I had completely forgotten. The old bylaws. The ones I had signed years ago when I had the rental property. They weren't like the new ones. They were old, dusty, and they were in a box in my storage unit. I knew I had to find them. It was a long shot, but it was my only hope. I spent hours in my storage unit rummaging through dusty boxes filled with old tax returns, forgotten photo albums, and Christmas decorations. Just as I was about to give up, I found it. A thick manila envelope, yellowed and brittle with age. Stamped on the front, in faded ink, Whispering Pines, HOA, Official Bylaws minus 1998 edition. I ripped it open. My hands trembling. I flipped through the pages, my eyes scanning the fine print, the clauses, the rules. And there it was, on page 12, in a section titled Community Property, a clause that stated, in no uncertain terms, that the HOA had no authority to annex private property, and that any changes to this rule had to be approved by a 2/3 majority of all property owners. Not just the board. My heart was a drum in my chest. She was a complete fraud. She hadn't gotten a 2/3 vote. She had just made up the new bylaws and sent them out. All of her actions were based on a lie. All of the fines were fake. She was exposed. I spent the next few hours meticulously documenting everything. I took pictures of the old bylaws, highlighted the key clauses, and created a document detailing all of Beverly's fabricated rules and fines. I went back to my friend, the lawyer. He read my documents with wide, shocked eyes. She's a menace, he said, his voice filled with quiet rebellion. This is classic Karen behavior, but on a scale I've never seen before. You have everything you need. But how are you going to get this out to the community? I'm not going to get it out to the community, I said, a slow, determined smile spreading across my face. I'm going to let the community come to her. Tomorrow is the block party. She's expecting 100 people. The next morning I woke up early. The air was crisp and cold, the lake still and glassy. It was the perfect day for a block party. I drove down to the local hardware store and bought a heavy-duty chain and a thick padlock. I drove back to my cabin, walked up to my road, and, for the first time ever, I locked it. I stood there, a quiet sentinel, waiting. I didn't have to wait long. At around 11 o'clock, the first cars started to arrive. A dozen of them. Then a few more. And then a bus. A big white tour bus with Caterers of the Pines written on the side. My heart was pounding, a wild, frantic drum against my ribs, but my hands were steady. I saw Beverly drive up in her SUV, her face a mask of triumphant glee. She got out of her car, saw me standing by the gate, and her smile faltered. The hundreds of people gathered behind her, a sea of confused faces, looked on. "What are you doing, Mike?" she shrieked, her voice high and shrill. "Unlock this gate right now. My guests are on the way." "Guests?" I asked, my voice low and calm. I thought this was a community block party. She looked at the crowd, then back at me, her face turning a furious crimson. She had lied to the community. This wasn't a community event at all. It was a private party she had planned without anyone's permission, on a road she had no right to claim as her own. "I warned you," she sneered, her voice a poisonous whisper, dripping with a self-satisfied malice that made my blood run cold. She stood there, framed by the blinding afternoon sun. Her smile a thin, cruel line as she held up a laminated sheet of paper. It was a court order, a temporary restraining order demanding I cease all activity on what she claimed was community property. The dozens of people gathered behind her. A sea of confused faces looked on as she gestured triumphantly to the bright orange tape now strung across the front of my land. My entire world, the cabin I had just painstakingly restored, was about to be snatched away. I could feel the panic rising in my chest, a hot, suffocating wave. But before I could even formulate a single coherent thought, the sound of a vehicle turning over echoed from behind her, and I turned just in time to see the bright green flash of a small, county-issued tractor pulling up to her driveway. And that's when everything went wrong. She wasn't just a liar. She was a fraud. 100 people were standing in the middle of a dirt road, waiting for a party that was never going to happen. I watched as the caterers, the band, and the photographer all began to pull up behind the crowd, their faces confused. I stepped forward, holding the old, brittle bylaws in my hand. "Everyone," I said, my voice clear and strong, "I have something to show you. Beverly has been lying to you. This is not a community event. She has no right to use my land. Her new bylaws are a fraud. This entire thing is a scam." I began to read from the old bylaws, the clause about private property, the clause about the 2/3 vote, the clause that gave me every right to lock my own gate. As I spoke, the crowd erupted. People were talking, whispering, looking at Beverly with a new, suspicious gaze. She was cornered. She looked like a rat trapped in a cage. Her husband, a quiet, unassuming man, walked up to her, his face a mask of mortification, and began to whisper in her ear. She was exposed, defeated, and she had no one to blame but herself. The moral of the story is simple. It's one I'll carry with me for the rest of my life. Never, ever assume you're beaten. And never underestimate the power of a man who has nothing left to lose. I have a long road ahead of me, a new battle to fight. The lawsuit to get her to pay for the fine she issued, the fight to have her removed from the HOA board for good, but for the first time in a long time, I'm not afraid. I'm ready, because Beverly's petty tyranny was just the beginning. I've been a target before, and I'll be a target again, but next time, they won't even see me coming.